Welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. This podcast is a production of Swaim Strategies, a consulting firm dedicated to nonprofit fundraising events. We're coming to you today from the studios of the AV department. Please welcome our hosts, Kristen Steele and Samantha Swaim.
Hello, and welcome to the Fundraising Elevator, where we're all headed up. We are very excited for today's conversation because at the root of all social justice movements, at the root of all religions, at the root of all change is gathering. And often we talk about gathering as a gala, and we talk about gathering as a big event that is fancy. And so often in the nonprofit sector, we need to look at the essentials of how we gather people, how we are directly impacting them, and how we're inviting them into our work. And that goes way beyond something that is a formal affair. And so today, while we are all at Elevate, it is day 2 of the Elevate conference. We've popped into the studio early to be able to talk to you about the importance of community-centric fundraising and specifically community-centric events. And we have quite the expert here. We're so excited. As we do that, I want to remind you that we have been talking about the CERTA application. So we've had Paul Zach started us off this season to talk about the neuroscience and the behavioral science behind what makes for a really inclusive, amazing experience that people walk away with and build movements out of because of the sense of belonging. So today we want to talk about community-centric events. We're going to pull a little bit of that frame through to be able to really look at all of the elements of that kind of event that can impact us. So let me introduce our guest now. Nel Taylor, they, them, is an organizational equity strategist, ethical fundraising expert, and nonprofit systems fixer with 14 years of experience in the sector. As a citizen of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, they bring an anti-racist, justice-driven lens to indigenizing fundraising. Hell yeah. They're working with leadership and organizational systems across mission-driven spaces. Nel helps nonprofits make real structural change rather than running on vibes and defaulting to white supremacy culture, so right? Instead of just running on vibes and defaulting to white supremacy culture, we can define our philosophies and build systems and policies that address harmful practices at their root causes, transforming how our organizations operate, raise money, and build relationships with our communities. Now, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we're so excited that you're here and excited to have you join us at Elevate this year.
Yes.
But for all of our listeners and all of our friends out there, I wanted to just start with the big picture and ask you, why do you do this work? Let's start with you first and your story.
Totally. Before I dive in, I'm going to do a quick access check-in. I have Tourette's, so you may notice my face makes some involuntary movements. I'm not making faces at you, I promise. My story actually starts when I was 14 years old. I left home and was living on the streets for 4 years. And for those 4 years, when you're a minor, it's difficult to be able to access services because usually they're just trying to put you in foster care or pair you back with a home that's not safe. So once I turned 18, I was able to access services through the Homeless Youth Continuum here. And there was a circus school for unhoused youth. And I joined that circus school. And through that process of the year of going to school there, I got connected to services, wound up becoming housed, going through transitional housing, getting my first job. And at the end of that was basically kind of a success story for the organization. And that was something that they really capitalized on. And I use that, term consciously. I became kind of the poster child, the formerly homeless poster child. And at events, they would bring me out to deliver the appeal. I once had a event planner tell me that if I cried while giving the appeal, people were 30% more likely to give.
No.
So my story was definitely being exploited.
Yeah.
And when I decided to enter the sector, I was really driven by changing the traditional practices that caused me harm and that cause a lot of other program participants harm. First through fundraising, been doing that forever, and now I'm also working in systems change with organizations to shift the more sector-wide traditional practices.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
The work, the story.
The work.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
I'm always struck by the phrase success story because it's often not grounded in the storyteller. It's a frame that we bring to people's stories for them.
Well, it's the success of the organization,
That's right.
not my success.
That's right.
It's proof of their,
Concept.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's start big picture for folks. I feel like the idea of community-centric fundraising is gaining more and more traction within the broader sector. It's had a lot of traction for a long time, but other folks are sort of like, wait a minute, I've heard that a few times now. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little more broadly about the idea of community-centric fundraising and specifically how you would define a community-centric event for folks.
Absolutely. So starting with community-centric fundraising in general, it's still a pretty new movement, but like you said, it's gaining a lot of traction. However, communities of color have been practicing community-centric fundraising for centuries. And all of us who practice that know that, this wasn't a new invention. But essentially, this is an alternative to donor-centric fundraising where the donor is really the hero of the story. Community-centric fundraising focuses on the community and a holistic view of fundraising. So it doesn't mean devaluing the donor when we're decentering them, but we're bringing up the rest of the community and looking at how everyone participates in philanthropy, even those who aren't like directly development professionals, and putting the focus on the community that we are working with and learning from, as well as knowing that the donor is a part of that ecosystem, bringing them into the hard conversations and bringing them into the ecosystem that we're building as a partner rather than a hero. And that looks like a lot of things. It looks like changing practices around storytelling, like we were just talking about with my story. And where I've really focused in on is how that changes how we're doing events. And Sam, you said in your intro that, we think about the traditional gala, big fancy dinner, paddle raise, all of that. And those events can be pretty exclusionary to entire communities, especially the communities we work with.
Yes.
And so the room doesn't always represent our actual community. And so through community-centered events, we're able to make even just small adjustments that really change how people are experiencing the event, how program participants are, or the community that we work with and learn from are able to be included in the event, how it makes them feel to be at the event, and other ways to make the event essentially more accessible to everyone, make giving more accessible to everyone, and ditch some of those exploitative practices that are also pretty exclusionary, mostly for people with a certain giving capacity.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's this sort of conflict that we've been up against for decades of the traditional gala model is really rooted in very exclusionary practices that have been rooted in people with money being able to demonstrate that show of money, right? So it's been rooted in social climbing, it's been rooted in social status, it's been rooted in tax shelter protection of your money.
Absolutely.
So a lot of practices that I think have been negative for a very long time. And during COVID, one of the things we saw was by opening the doors to a much bigger audience when events were virtual or were in a hybrid space, there was such an immense amount of resource coming to the organization. And when I say resource, I mean all kinds, right? Treasure, talent, time, people volunteering, engagement that had not existed in the prior format.
Yeah.
So I'm like such a fan of focusing on community-centric as a model. I think also in addition to that, a lot of sort of questions in the model have been, but donor-centered work. So I love that you brought up, this is not with the exclusion to the donor. There is also a value for the donor. But I'm curious, when you've been sort of thinking about bringing that to the table of working with organizations on how to be more inclusive. What are some of the, just for perspective, to ground everyone and make sure we're all talking from the same place, what are some of the ways that you've seen the exclusionary practices working against the organization?
Yeah, so if you think to any gala that you've been at, a lot of times if you just look around the room, the audience looks the same. It's a pretty specific group of people that doesn't represent the community. And I think also what that does is organizations will underestimate the giving power of people in the community, people who aren't like these major high-level donors, who just haven't been asked in the same way. And when we include those folks, we have like more capacity for new donors, first of all, and also like more giving in general. So one of the ways it works against organizations is you're really limiting the pool from which you're getting resources and the people who are supporting your organization. There's also when you're not living your values, you break trust with the community.
Yeah.
And people who are excluded from these kinds of events have pretty negative views of what a gala is.
Yes.
And that breaks trust with the community you're serving and learning from.
Staff.
And also, staff, other people who feel excluded from that. So that breaks that trust. And then also like I said, you're excluding an entire donor base, but you're also missing out on bringing in new donors. So a lot of times you're inviting the same people every year, but when you open it up to the community, you're actually diversifying your donor base. And even if these people are not the highest dollar level givers, we all know that when you invest in new donors who even initially give it small amounts, that is investing in they'll give more and have a lot more giving power, especially if they get older or just the more trust they build with your organization. That's what's coming to mind right now.
Yeah.
Well, and what's interesting too is to think about how narrowly we are seeking resource if the only thing we're doing is putting financial contributions into the metrics of how we're looking at things. That, when we talk to folks about what is the primary function of this event for your organization, 9.9 times out of 10, we've got to raise X.
Yeah.
But if we're really talking about gathering our community and we're really taking a look at what that is, we have to start to value support in a 360-degree view, and people coming and giving you their attention and supporting your organization by going out and talking about your organization to other people, by directing people your way, by going out and directing donors your way. We have this very immediate, and don't get me wrong, nonprofits, I hear you. It's how the sector's built, right?
Yeah.
We're having this hyperventilation moment of oh my God, I've been told I have to raise this budget. Therefore, there can be nothing in my purview that is important unless it is actively pursuing this $250,000 or $75,000, whatever that is. And so I think in that way, we have it also supports this idea that we come to a very narrow definition of accessible. And so I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what makes an event accessible, because I think when we say that, people hear a very specific thing, and it comes down to, ticket price. And it's wait a minute. This is a much broader conversation. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about access in terms of DEI, DEIA, DEIJ work, there's material and non-material access. So material access can be things like physical assistance, like wheelchair ramps, those kinds of access, but also they can be access to food, access to wealth, those other kinds of material resources. And then we have non-material access, which is access to decision making, access to community spaces, access to being able to get a job without being discriminated against. A lot of times what people think when we say accessibility is specifically physical, material access for people with disabilities. And that is incredibly important, but it's also, like you were saying, it's that really small piece of what access means in general. So an accessible event is, of course, you want an event or a venue that either has a ramp or an elevator for folks who need that assistance. And I always say, like, assume disabled people are coming to your event, get interpreters without people needing to ask. But it's also like, who is able to be in the room, who is able to participate. It's that non-material access. And if you're doing, a lot of events will have a program where there's performers and there's dancing, there's something fun happening. And so you're also giving people access to that experience, to that bonding and that collective gathering, by opening up those non-material access opportunities.
Well, and I think the brutal truth for organizations is if you are not actively doing something to create an accessible space in all the ways that can look, you are actually contributing to an exclusionary space.
Yeah.
And I think people don't want to wear that jacket, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it not true.
Yeah. It takes effort. It is work. I always say equity takes time, effort, and money.
Yes.
But, as organizations, not only are we responsible for the mission, the problem that we're trying to solve, we're also responsible for like greater change in the community, which means investing in and putting work into these other ways that we can impact versus just the one piece of your mission, which might be providing a social service or something like that to a community.
Yes.
Well, as we sit here in March of 2026, there has been so much change, such an assault on systems, on people, on human decency. And I have seen and found a lot of inspiration in the fact that nonprofit leaders have been rebuilding and rethinking the world for a very long time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've been witnessing is as systems are being sort of pulled apart and are crumbling, it's already being rebuilt. So I feel like, one, it's a really important time for nonprofit leaders to have a voice and to be heard.
Yeah.
But two, I think that it's a really important time to bring people back in, to invite people in, to give them a sense of belonging to a space that is already doing this work. And COVID taught us to separate people, right? And so now how do we invite people back in that I feel like there is probably in our 30-year history of doing events, I don't think there's ever been a more essential time to have events within your plan, but also just simply to literally be inviting people in.
Yeah.
And so often I think people think, oh, event, check, we have our golf tournament or we have our walk. But I'm thinking, no, I want you to have a dinner party with your staff. I want you to have your board over and take a tour of the facility. I want you to be inviting donors in every day to be a part of what you're doing. So I feel like this conversation in this time is the medicine to so much of what we're witnessing. So what are the key tenets that are a community-centric event? Like what makes it different than what we've seen before or what people might like think of as a traditional nonprofit event?
Yeah. So there are like material choices that you can make. And one of the organizations that I worked with and did my first community-centric event, and it was also their first community-centric event, was Partners for a Hunger-Free Oregon. Awesome. We threw a storytelling event called Nourish. And some of the choices that we made, first of all, we had a line item for childcare just built in because we were going to be featuring stories from community members. So this was not the executive director goes up and gives a speech, and this was individual people who have been affected by hunger and lack of access to food were writing their own stories, were sharing poetry, and we were really featuring them on stage as the center of this work and the voices that needed to be heard. So in doing that, we knew some people might need help with transportation, some people might need help with childcare. So we built those kinds of things into the budget in the first place. Also, like I mentioned before, like just assuming that people with disabilities are going to come to your event. So not only having a space that's physically accessible, but just assume you're going to need sign language interpreters. Assume that you might need translated captions, especially if you know your community and what they might need, rather than having anyone have to ask for that. I always tell people, find the most generous thing you can do and then figure out the logistics, and then figure out, can we do this? And sometimes you can't.
Right.
You know, sometimes equity is something we work towards over a long period of time. It's not always going to be the most equitable. But if we start with the budget we have, the limitations we have, that's really going to limit your creativity in problem solving. So when we were thinking about childcare, we wound up doing the event at Polaris Hall, which is a local music venue, rather than one of those big, you know, gala event spaces.
Yeah.
And they actually had, downstairs, they had what was a green room for artists. And we were like, we could turn this, we could hire a couple licensed preschool teachers, which were some people I knew, and we could have childcare in the basement in this room on site. We wound up not having to go with that because there weren't enough people who needed it, so we just gave them stipends.
Oh, nice.
Another thing with an event that I'm working on right now, where we're going to be featuring stories of people who are experiencing homelessness, knowing that this is an evening event, them staying that late could mean that they don't have access to shelter because they're not standing in line when the shelter opens. And so we've included in the budget, like, okay, how can we take care of hospitality? How can we pay for motel rooms or something to make sure these people can participate and also have access to somewhere to sleep? So those are a couple of the examples. Sliding scale tickets, like you mentioned, it's not only a way that, like, you get, you know, more people are able to come, but you wind up with a room that represents your community, a room of diverse lived experiences and cultures, and that creates more, like, energy too. Like, that's better for the event when it's not just the same people who see each other at the same gala every year and make the same small talk, you know? We featured live music, and everyone that we had on stage, we made some really conscious choices to work with talent of color, and like an auctioneer agency that had folks of color, and
pay them.
Yes, and we paid them. Yes, we paid. And we paid like good wages. We paid the band like $500, and honestly, that's not much in terms of like a gala budget,
right?
And we paid each of the storytellers.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they all got an honorarium, which is also what we're doing with this other event I'm working on right now. And some of the other examples, we decided not to do a seated dinner. And honestly, I've been to so many galas, and I am so tired of the same chicken dinner. Rubber chicken dinner every time. And I've talked to so many people who are like, I'd rather just write my check every year. Like, I don't need to do all this. So we instead did a happy hour with like heavy hors d'oeuvres, which saved us a lot of money. And was like more accessible to folks. There weren't like seated tables where you put a bunch of donors and one program participant, which creates like a weird dynamic. It was, you know, standing happy hour. And then for the event, everyone was sitting in like road seating. So they're looking at the folks who are talking. There's no dishes clanging or people making like side conversation. The focus really is on the community, and also created this space where people could mingle and get to know each other. And some of the other ways we're thinking about accessibility, this event that I'm working on right now, we're thinking about the folks from the community who are going to be speaking, and we're like, should we offer alcohol? Is that even appropriate at this event? Or what are ways we could get creative where there's one portion of the event that is like, that does have a bar, but then we stop serving and folks can come at a time that's safe for them. And then a lot of folks are talking about alternatives to paddle raises. I will say, I love a paddle raise. I love a paddle raise, and I always get a little too excited about a paddle raise. But I think it is really, not only is it a great strategy for giving, but it's this like community participation. There's this collective effervescence when people are raising their paddles. And I think the thing that makes it the most exclusive is so many paddle raises just go down to $100. And then stop. And so at Nourish, I think it was our 18th anniversary or something. And so we went down to $18.
Perfect.
I love that.
And we wound up, it was the last level of the night, and everyone could just hand in their bidder number to make that donation. And I think we wound up with like 90% giving.
That's amazing.
Of the entire event.
Awesome.
And And there was something like 30% of the attendees were new to our organization.
Oh, very cool.
We advertised it. We had posters up around the around the neighborhood. So this wasn't just invite only to donors. This was like, there's a community event happening. Please come.
Yeah.
And we built a lot of like connections and relationships that way. So those are some of the ways that like materially we can make things more accessible, and really create a space that is interesting and exciting, and where people are wanting to like participate, where everyone can be part of the paddle raise, where you don't have a big live auction, but instead you have some raffle packages that are available at different levels. So people can afford to buy a $20 raffle ticket. Something else you can do is just give everybody one raffle ticket for free. And people can still purchase more if they want to. One of the things about the really expensive auctions is some people will be willing to bid like $2,000, and then if they don't win, they're not writing us a $2,000 check.
Correct.
They would have been willing to do it before. And so with a raffle, you're actually, everyone's contributing to this pot. And so ultimately you're saving money by not going with a big event venue, by not paying for the expensive catering. So many events come in either like at cost or make a really small margin. And donors know that. They're like, you're spending all this money on an event and you're hardly making anything. So that increases the net profit, that increases the community access, it increases your donor base. Ultimately is also just like more fun. Like people left nourished. Like we had like dancing and live music. They left smiling. Not tired. And exhausted from a long program.
Like for the longevity of the relationship is such a gift.
Yeah.
Well, so I want to dive even deeper into all those things. I want to talk to you about your decision-making process, how you arrived at agreements with committee members or with organizers. But we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we'll dive into all that.
Great.
Event planners are discovering Avenue, the Pacific Northwest's new AV-forward event venue, intentionally designed with nonprofit fundraising events in mind. From the 93-foot video production wall to the highest quality sound and lighting, premier AV features are included in every venue rental. You'll find the space and audiovisual enhancements to create your unique and memorable event. Visit avenueportland.com to schedule your personal tour.
Hello, and welcome back to the Fundraising Elevator. We are here with Nel Taylor, where we are diving into all things community-centric fundraising, and specifically community-centric events. And before we left on the break, you were talking about all the elements that you've incorporated with some great case studies and stories about events that you've done. One of the things that I have always loved about organizations that come to us and say, hey, we want to like really push ourselves here, is that it allows for the creativity. And what I'm hearing you say is that there's a lot of, how do we make this happen? How do we evaluate this? So I want to dive into the house so we can help other people navigate that and figure out how to get to a different end result than maybe what they've done in the past. One of your awesome examples that you gave was that sometimes you don't have a high dollar live auction and instead are looking for ways that everyone can participate, maybe a raffle or something of that. And you mentioned you could give everyone a raffle ticket. And I wanted to highlight that because we had North by Northeast, a organization here, come and say, we want to push on how to be more community-centric in our event. And it was like a fun exercise for us all collaborating together to think about and brainstorm. And then we went out to community and asked the community, what are some of the things also that would make this joyful for you, that would make this feel like this is your place and these are your people. And a couple of the elements that we did was we did provide a raffle ticket to everyone who came in the door with the option to buy additional raffle tickets. But we had two raffles, and one of the raffles was a $1 ticket. One of the raffles was a $20 ticket, so that there were access points throughout. And similar to your example of the paddle raise going to the $18 level, they had a paddle raise that went to the $12 level because it was their 12th anniversary. And they were celebrating a matching gift from their founder who would match every $12 gift.
Yeah.
My favorite part of that story is the founder herself matched herself multiple times. She gave like 5 times at the $12 level and then also matched herself. But that there are creative solutions to what we've always done. And I think we're out of the era of we've always done it that way, right? Like we just can't operate that way anymore because fundraising is different now than it was in 2023, let alone 2018. And we're seeing this like huge evolution happen of wealth transfer and who's involved and generational engagement and generational interest. So I'm super excited that you're working with organizations that are like, yeah, let's go there. I want to dive into like how we go there. So Kristen, I know you had a couple of thoughts.
I did.
too.
I had a couple of light bulbs that happened during the break. So before the break, we were talking about budgeting.
Yeah.
And now I loved your idea of what's essentially aspirational budgeting. Put it all on the table. What are all the things we want to do? I think too often we say no first. It can't be added. This is only the way we've ever done it. Whereas what if we put daycare in? What if we put paying performers in? What if we didn't do this? All of those things, because you can't hit the thing you aren't at least aiming for.
Yeah.
And you can calibrate from there, but it may also be an evaluative tool for you and your organization to look at the things on the table and go, oh my God, that thing that was the monolith that we couldn't touch, that we've always just done, it's actually not that important compared to these other things because these create a wider space for us. The other thing, when we were talking about catering, I want to be mindful of our catering partners because my experience has been they have been some of the best budget collaborators I know. And so I think organizations need to remember that they can go and brainstorm with their vendor partners because if they are truly partners, y'all are in relationship in the same way you are with donors, that you are with staff, with you, that your vendors can want to play. They want to dream too. They want to be able to be collaborators with you and to make impact. And I think sometimes we just look at it as we're paying them. Yes. But also, if they've been with us for year over year over year, they are invested in our success as well. And so I think looking at them as collaborating partners, all too often we miss that opportunity. And so I think I want to throw that out there for folks. We talked very, very briefly about the idea of sliding scale tickets before the break. This is one of those things that becomes a thing.
A sticky point.
a sticky point in organizations when they bring it to the table. So I think often it's a sticking point because people don't understand what the intention is, how to do it well, and what the impact can be. Can you talk about what that is, why we should do it, and what it can look like?
Yeah,
Yeah. How did
absolutely.
you get to a decision point?
Well, and this is one of those things where, again, when you start with what's the most generous thing you can do, and then you start to play with the budget and find out where, you can land. And I will say that the sliding scale tickets and also offering, I always have someone can purchase a free ticket without needing to ask for it. There's no sponsorship request. We usually will have a little like an illustration that's like if you have these kinds, like if you have healthcare and if you own a car, like maybe select this level of ticket. And like if you're someone who like is living paycheck to paycheck, maybe select this level of ticket. And we trust people to make the decision that's right for them. But this is something that boards struggle with.
Yeah. That's why I want to talk about how.
Struggle with this.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, like ticket prices have never really been the thing that brings in money at events.
Yeah.
Because you're almost just barely making a little bit over cost of the dinner that you're putting a lot of money into. And if you're cutting back on the catering and having more of like a happy hour thing, you can't charge people $200 for that. It's just not fair. So when you're reducing the cost of the ticket, you just make up for that with another sponsorship. These kinds of events, you do have to really focus on sponsorships. And when we're getting rid of the auction, which takes a lot of staff time and effort to put together, you put half of that effort into getting another community sponsorship.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of coming to an agreement about this, I find that like boards mostly just need to be like educated. I think people, especially staff in nonprofits, can get really frustrated with boards who like aren't really understanding the changes that are happening within the sector. But presenting it as, here's how we make it up. Here's the actual budget. Here's how much, if we raise the ticket prices, it would only bring up our revenue by this much.
Yeah.
One of the things that I have heard several times that is a sticking point is people are concerned that if we're offering low cost tickets, then we won't have giving capacity in the room. Which just makes me feel so yucky.
Yeah.
And I think that's another one of those things where we're really underestimating the giving capacity of certain communities, and the other like capacity they bring in, where they become partners, they become volunteers in the future, they become vendors. Like, you build those relationships. But I think like if you're stewarding the donors that are already committed to giving at that high level and you're getting those pre-commits, you'd be surprised how many people are giving in the room that you didn't exactly count on.
Yeah.
And especially when you think about the percentage of their income that they're giving.
Yeah.
Folks with a smaller income might be making a more substantial donation and contribution based on their capacity. And that's something that in community-centric fundraising we need to value.
Yeah.
All the different ways that people give. But honestly, in my experience, when you're doing an event at like a small local venue, you're not paying for like a full seated dinner. The event is like shorter and more casual.
Yeah.
You're spending so much less money than you normally do that it really does open the door for reducing the expense of the people participating, because you're not actually losing out on that much.
I feel like that leans into the aspirational budgeting process, because to me, budget should look at both your revenue generation and your expense. And so if your expenses are already shifting, where your revenue is coming from and how you're securing revenue, I think also can shift in alignment with that. We have done a lot of different iterations to try to play with what works. And one of the things we've done is open sliding scale where it's name your price. We've also done a sliding scale where within that sliding scale, we have multiple ticket offerings. And one ticket offering specifically was called like not based on an individual's capacity, but more of I'm a, like a community ticket. Like if you're a volunteer, if you're a client, if you're a staff member, choose this ticket. And then we had like a donor ticket, and then we had a pay it forward ticket. Yeah. So that there was a fund going back into supporting the lower ticket price. We then experimented with a pay it forward model that has worked really well for us, where we really looked at, well, who are we trying to get in the room and what is the intention of the sliding scale? And we actually budgeted the price point of the actual ticket higher than an individual cost of a person in seat. So I think the cost to us for that event was something like $120. And we budgeted those tickets to be $175. And then we just budgeted the 100 tickets were not paid at all. And so having 150 people come and pay $175, the cost offset of 100 tickets, we did not offer them to the community just at large free. We invited community to come as our guests. So instead of it feeling like, oh, I'm getting a giveaway, we made it very intentional. Like, we want you to be there as our guest. And so that intentionality generated probably the most, I think, like the biggest return on investment, the biggest feel good event that like felt like so specifically their community. And also like the best positive response, because they were really trying to think about how do we include everyone without this feeling like anyone is less than or has to identify in a way that feels that way. Yeah. But we've played with a lot of different options. That I'm intrigued by the pay it forward model though, because we have seen that some folks with the capacity really want to make that option available. Yeah. But I think it can look a million ways. Like there's not just one.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, I mean, how many times have you done an event and all of a sudden you need seat fillers? Yeah. At the end. And so often that becomes like, okay, now we're going to give away community tickets. And as someone who was was a participant in nonprofit like services and benefited from that. I can't tell you how many times I would get a last minute call like 2 days before an event and be like, we want to invite you to this event and like honor you as a community member. And then they sit me at a table with people I don't know.
Right.
But also, it doesn't feel like an invite, an earnest invite 2 days before the event.
No, it's I'm a seat filler. And so we need to assume that there's always a certain amount of tickets that we wind up giving away just to like fill seats. And why don't we start with that? And budget for that. And yeah, the pay it forward model is really effective because people do want to feel like their ticket cost and what they're giving is going to something concrete. Like I said, there's donors who I've heard the feedback of like, you're spending all this money on this event. I don't even know how far my contribution is going. Is it just going to pay for the event? But if you can show them like, this is a 1-for-1, you're sponsoring someone else to come.
Yeah.
And then, I love that idea of doing a direct invitation to the folks you want to be there and to be represented in the room. And I will say, if you're doing a seated dinner, don't just put one vulnerable community member at a table, because I have been the person where like people are asking me questions like, oh, did you really eat out of trash cans? Like,
for the love of God.
Barely contained.
For the love of God.
Yeah. And because it's a novelty.
Yeah.
And the Circus Project, the organization that I actually wrote a piece kind of going public about how I was treated by that organization. And they did make a public apology and later compensated me, which is something you can do, if you ever mess up and, need to repair some harm, put some money in people's pockets. But we did like a small dinner salon series for a while, and it was with like politicians and wealthy people. And it was basically them just having dinner with me and asking me questions about like really hard stuff that happened in my life that were really like personal and invasive questions. And so that's just something to think about as you're like arranging your seats. It's like maybe like if you're inviting vulnerable community members or community members who you are like collaborating with and learning from and serving, maybe put a couple of them together so they feel a little more welcome. But I'm also like, I'm over the like seated tables. I've been at tables where I'm just like having to turn like this to see what's going on. Do row seating.
Yeah, we are big fans.
Yeah, everyone can focus on the people who are speaking, who are telling their stories. You don't have dishes clanging around. People aren't distracted. And that's also a way of like, if you don't do assigned seating, people can sit with whoever they feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
I think that's great. You were talking earlier about some alternative venues to sort of quote unquote gala spaces. I think that is a real block for folks, both in imagination, but also in actual resource in understanding what that could look like for them. What are some types of venues you're hosting events in? What are you thinking about when you're thinking about events for spaces? And how can we unlock that for folks to dream differently about what space their events can be happening in?
Yeah, I think when I did Nourish, which was the first time I did an event like this, and I'm a musician and I'm a part of the music scene here in Portland, so I know all of these venues that do live music and thinking about capacity. If we're not doing round seated dinner tables, there's more room for capacity because you're not taking up that much space. So the main things I focused on was like, what is the capacity? Is it physically accessible, that material access? And can they accommodate sound and like a screen and sound and maybe music? That's all you really need. Everything else you're bringing to the space. And one of the things I loved about doing an event at Polaris was, some of these other venues are really blank spaces, which is done intentionally, and people will like decorate or do their own lights or whatever. But it can feel a little institutional. Whereas with Polaris, I didn't have to spend any time or money on decorating because they have these beautiful curtains and they had a chandelier, and it's a vintage building that they've restored. It feels community-centric. centered. We've also worked with Alberta Abbey and the Alberta House, I think is now what it's called. Yeah. We also were intentional about the venue being in a neighborhood where our community lives and being accessible by public transportation, as well as having good parking. And some of the other things we thought about were like, are the chairs that they have going to support different bodies?
Yeah.
And, you know, and some of these things, like I said, like you have limitations. You're not always going to be able to make the most equitable choice. But if you start by just your wish list, like an ideal venue would have, you know, larger chairs and, you know, this parking accessibility, all of that. Ultimately, all you really need, though, is can someone talk into a mic? Can you have some music?
Yep.
Maybe a screen up because you promised the sponsors you'd put their logos up, of course, and some chairs. And other than that, you're bringing the sparkle to the space.
I agree. I love that.
I love that.
I want to talk about some tools. So one, I think we could go on for hours about ways to create access.
Sure.
And all, I mean, we actually just got sent a, like an access checklist that had, I think it was 56 pages to it. So, I mean, we could literally talk about this forever.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes the hope and the goal is that we're just encouraging folks to think about what are the ways we can create more access, not necessarily hitting all 56 pages of a checklist. And sometimes I think figuring out how to do that is hard. And so one of the things you mentioned is translation. In the advent of the lean into more online tools, leaning into more digital resources for gathering, we have found that in-person events can tap into a Zoom call, and you could use Zoom for captions.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very easy way to have captions available by simply having your microphone attached to a Zoom meeting and then showing the captions on the screen. No cost if you have a Zoom account.
Yeah.
I suppose the cost of a Zoom account. Also, we have found that there are more tools that are translating very accurately into multiple languages, including my favorite thing lately is being able to hear. Like audibly hear in multiple languages versus just captions in different languages. And so one of the things that we've done is in the digital space, you can choose your language, but in the in-person space, you can scan a QR code and choose your language and plug in your cell phone with an earbud and listen.
Through your cell phone?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Sync Words is the tool. It's amazing. And literally all they have to have, we'll link it in the show notes, the only thing they have to have is a feed, an audio feed. So if you can plug your microphone into a call-in number, like a Zoom call, you can translate into multiple languages and have the attendees listen in their language of choice.
That is amazing. I did not know about this resource. Thank you so much. That's so cool.
This is one of those technologies for good.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I appreciate you talking about chairs of all sizes because I think that oftentimes that's a limiting factor for just even people feeling comfort in a space, not just, you know, will they come, but also will they come and stay, right? And will they feel like this is a place for them?
Yeah.
One of the things that we've done to accommodate a venue that doesn't have seating for all folks is we always look to provide a smattering of very stable chairs with no arms. So you're thinking for larger size individuals, it's an opportunity to like not have restriction of arms. We've also incorporated couches sometimes so that there's like a variety and mix of seating. And we're always looking for what other considerations have we not thought of? And one that we learned recently at an event were individuals that have very tall legs, simply stacking two chairs, if they're two stable stackable chairs, can make their 90-degree angle on their legs a lot more comfortable. The shorter chair, their legs are falling asleep and they have to be up and moving around. So, it's amazing to me to think of like, when you really dive into what best serves our audience, asking, you will get lots of answers that are specific to your audience. Have you ever built in anything in the like onboard registration process that opens up doors to that conversation of accessibility?
When we have done planning for events, when we're kicking off, first of all, one of the first things we go over is what are our non-revenue related goals. We identify like what our wish list is. We go through an equity lens. And while we're doing that, we have involved like other staff outside of the development team and sometimes like community members that we have relationships with. I haven't incorporated that into the registration process. And I have thought about it in terms of some of the disability access needs, which is, rather than someone having to disclose or make a request, we just assume and do as much as we can to accommodate ahead of time. But you're right that there are things that we're not going to think about that community members will probably have an idea of. And when you're talking about, the stacking the chairs for someone who might be tall, like this is another example of how material access benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities. And so like when we're being creative, we also don't need to limit ourselves to just how do we accommodate people who might have a disability, which that is where we want to start and center things. But the more you do to make people comfortable, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I'm at a movie that's too long or like a play that's too long and the seats are bad, I'm checking out. And if you're
I'm uncomfortable.
If you're holding your paddle raise at the end of the event, you want people to be comfortable. I love the couches. And creating a space that feels comfortable. But to answer your question, like, no, I haven't incorporated a way to request because I've tried to do as much as we can to offer everything we can offer. But you're right that there might be some things that maybe aren't in our equity lens, maybe aren't specific to people with disabilities, but would make things comfortable for other folks. And I think that, following up an event to get that kind of feedback. I think with the registration, I want to make it as low barrier as possible. And I don't want people to feel like they have to think up something. And I've always been someone who's like, offer accommodations up front rather than making someone think about what kind of accommodation they would need. But I think there's some real opportunity in following up an event about what would have made this more comfortable or accessible to you.
We have incorporated into our Elevate registration a list of all of the resources that we make sure that are already being offered up, from all the way from scale of like, price point access. We have volunteer opportunities and scholarship opportunities. The like mobility access, these are the things that are built into the building. These are the things that we're adding. Accessible restrooms that are all gender restrooms, dietary like elements. We've already built in these elements. Like we have a gluten-free option, we have a dairy-free option, we have a nut-free option. But then we also do ask in the registration process, what other we identify captions are available. Like we try to give them a list of everything because it's actually a marketing tool that says you are welcome here. Right. Like it's a lens I can look through and be like, is this an event for me?
Oh, they've thought about some things.
And then if there is something on there that is not listed, how do we accommodate it? The interesting thing in that process for us is that when we've gotten responses that we can't accommodate or that we don't know how to, it leads to a great conversation with the guest about how do we make this work for you? Like we had last year, we had an individual who couldn't eat any seed oil. And I wasn't totally sure how to incorporate that. So I checked in with her first and had a call with her about, tell me all the places this shows up and what this looks like for you and what your ideal scenario is. And then I contacted the caterer and they came up with a custom menu. And I was able to articulate like not just the oils you're using, this also needs to be incorporated into the dressings you're using, the sauces you're using, the marinades you're using, because that's what she articulated to me. So the sort of intentionality takes a teeny bit of time. And every year we have some request that comes in and I'm like, oh, okay, how do we do that? Let's find out. And I guarantee you the person who's asking or identifying or flagging it knows how to solve it. So that becomes a really easy conversation. And the person with the seed oil allergy to this day is like, it's the most inclusive event I've ever attended because we accommodated the needs she had, right? So I think there's real power in it. I think that being community-centric does not mean it's any less of an event. I think to your point, you already indicated like the fun is still there. In fact, maybe even more fun. The music, the dancing. Are there other like fun things that you've done at community-centric events that you would say like this should be at every event?
Yeah. The raffle is always really fun because everyone feels like they can participate, especially if you've given everyone a ticket. So they're not like checking out during an auction.
Yeah.
And, you know, like sometimes when you're working with auctioneers, we'll have different like games at certain levels. I try to bring all of those games down to a lower dollar amount that everyone can participate. The live music, I am a big proponent of, and having a quality MC in addition to your auctioneer, I think is important. These are also, you know, when you're talking about building relationships with vendors, your vendors and your talent, this is an opportunity to put money into the economy of the community that you're there to support too.
Yeah.
So, you know, can you buy your catering from a local Black-owned business? And can you feature like trans women and disabled people, you know, on stage as your talent? I have loved, I love working with actors to MC.
Oh, yeah. Me too.
Yeah, rather than like a traditional event MC, because they're like really charismatic. And you guys know Dale Johannes, he's the best of both worlds.
Yes.
You know?
Actor and auctioneer.
Yeah, totally. And so, like having community talent, live music. What we did after the paddle race at Nourish, we like hit our goal. And then we had a local singer, LaRonda Steele, who is pretty well-known blues musician. She came just to sing a couple of songs at the end.
Great.
And we had like a little fun dessert that wasn't like, again, we're not seated. We're not like waiting for the dessert course. It was just like, yay, we hit our goal. Here's LaRonda Steele. Here's some dancing. Eat some cookies. And people just stayed until, like, honestly, the venue was like, okay, you guys have to leave now.
Now is the time.
And so that kind of thing, I think, like, getting creative if you're choosing not to have alcohol, what are some other ways you can bring the energy up?
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, again, just finding any way that people can feel included in something like a raffle or a paddle raise that gets the energy in the room going and nobody's like checking out.
Well, you may not know, but you just tapped into all things that are tied to Stardust. So I want to bring back to this frame because it's a frame we pulled through a whole bunch of our episodes this season. That is this work by Paul Zak, and he has identified as a neuroscientist what are the things that make an experience something that people actually walk away and want to be a part of a bigger movement, like they want to continue to act. So his research is all based on how do we get people to act, right? So if we're building movements, if we're building a base of supporters, a safety net of resources around us, I feel like our event should mobilize people to act, right? So we've been looking at the SERTA, which S is staging. So it's communicating in advance what is included for folks and making people feel like this is a place that they belong and a welcome place for them. I is immersion. So creating an event that people can fully be a part of and not be uncomfortable in, not feel like they're confused how to participate, but something that's really easy and clear. Let's see. SIR is relevance. And you just tapped on that with the idea that your audience and your stage are reflective of each other, right? Which I think is so important. Like people have to see themselves in the mission and in the work and in the organization. Target, it's the T, which is who's in your room and knowing who's in your room so that you can make sure that you're taking care of the people that are there and that they feel like this is the room I want to be and these are people I want to be in community with. And then action is the call to action, the like specific way that people can get involved. And so often we see events that we talk at people and then we never invite them to be a part of it. And yet that paddle raise is an easy way to invite them in and say, here's an action you can take right now. But it could also be, if you can't donate, here are other ways. Raise your hand and we're going to collect your paddle if you want to volunteer. We work with an organization that engages community members out working on literacy in the community. And we ask folks at the end of the event, if you want to be a volunteer reading with kids, raise your paddle. We'll collect it. We'll follow up with you. So that call to action is such an important piece too. So thank you for bringing your insights, your case studies, your best examples. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to step into the fundraising elevator.
Change.
It doesn't happen on its own. It happens on purpose, thanks to nonprofits that believe a brighter future is not just possible, but needed and deserved, and that connect people to causes and turn moments of generosity into movements. That's why Bloomerang is built for purpose, to raise the bar on what's possible and help every act of giving lead to more. Because when the bottom line is a better world, no goal is too lofty. Bloomerang, built for purpose.
Welcome back. We're here with Nel Taylor, and we were talking about community-centric events with so much joy that it should be contagious. During the break, we were actually talking about activation ideas at an event. And Nel, I wanted to kick it over to you. You had a couple of great ones that I want to make sure everybody hears about.
Yeah, absolutely. I love having activities that people can do and feel like they're really participating in the moment. And with some organizations I've done, like during the happy hour piece, we have pre-filled postcards where people can send a postcard to their senator.
That's great.
To endorse a bill that's coming up, or offering, sometimes there are those text to automatically send, a request to your local representatives, finding political ways to get involved, which feels like really activating for people beyond just making their donation. So those kinds of things, in addition to like volunteering, sometimes if you're working with like a advocacy organization, there's, an opportunity for someone to come to the Capitol. And sometimes you can provide that transportation for folks who want to come to a legislative day. So I love having ways that before we even dive into the event, we're already getting people involved. They're participating in an activity, and they're also going to be more likely to want to participate in more ways as the program goes on and up until the paddle raise.
Yeah,
So
you're
I love
increasing their level of connection.
Yeah.
And they're showing you already their willingness to be involved on multiple levels, which I think is great. We ask everyone who comes on the show to step into the fundraising elevator for us. It's our opportunity for you to sort of leave folks with that parting bit of advice for them. What would you offer folks when they're thinking about community-centric events?
Yeah, I think the main thing, and I've already said, because it's impossible to talk about this without starting here, but that's starting with what's the most generous thing you can do. And then figure out how you can make it work and if you can make it work. And I say this in all of the work I do. I do DEIJ work and HR work with organizations. And even in my HR work, I'm like, what's the most generous thing we can do? And then let's make sure it's legal, that we're in compliance.
Yes.
But that's that big piece. And then I always recommend either creating your own or having an equity lens. And if you're not familiar with an equity lens, usually it's a series of questions you can ask yourself when you're doing a project or starting a program, just to screen through, like, who are we forgetting? Who might be being left out of this? And most equity lenses you find are more geared towards programs and not towards fundraising. But and I know I'm going to have a second to talk about this later, but I've created an equity lens specific to fundraising. It's not 56 pages.
Love it.
It's like 4 pages.
Lovely.
And it goes over, like, not only what language are we using when we're talking about our program participants, who's in the imagery, and then a lot of the things we talked about today for events. So either creating your own, maybe you're building on it each time you do an event and get feedback, or accessing a resource like this and just going through it, as you said, like a checklist of maybe not every answer is going to be the most equitable thing, but are we pausing to ask ourselves these questions and reflecting on how generous we're able to be for each of those things? And that creates some structure for you to really have the infrastructure to build the event around once you've addressed those, like, core community-centered values.
I love it. So I want everyone to download that tool.
Yes.
How do people find you? How do people work with you? And how do people find that tool? We want to make sure we link it in the show notes too.
Yeah. So my website is nowthisconsulting.com, and the Equity Lens tool is nowthisconsulting.com/lens.
Great.
So hopefully easy to remember there. And on all the social medias, I'm Now This Consulting. On LinkedIn, I'm Nel Taylor. And on pretty much everywhere I'm online, if I have like a link in bio or link tree, the Equity Lens is right there too, along with some other resources that I've created.
Great.
Lovely. So if you're thinking about it, if you haven't done it before, look up the resources that Nel is offering, reach out, get in touch with Now This Consulting around how to begin. And we are so glad to have you join us on the show, and also so glad to have you with us at Elevate.
Yes.
If you missed Elevate and you want to participate and you want to be able to see the content from Elevate, we will have a link available on our website, and we'll include a link in the show notes for you to be able to access those. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for
and
all you do.
Thanks for helping everyone go up.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Fundraising Elevator is produced by Swaim Strategies at the studios of the AV department. The program is produced and directed by Steve Osborne, with audio engineering and original music by Dwayne Anderson and Heidi Christensen. Video production by John Collier. Graphic design by Pendulum Creative Group. And voiceover by Josh Boykin.
Hey y'all, it's Kristen. Before we leave, I want to ask for your help to make the podcast grow. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please like, follow, and subscribe to the Fundraising Elevator. And if you're getting a lot out of the show, share it with a friend. Leave us a review. These things help make sure that the podcast continues heading up. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in.
Are you ready to engage supporters and grow your base with your own podcast? Then let us introduce you to our partners at the AV department in Portland, Oregon. In addition to delivering exceptional live event audiovisual production and videography, they also have a top-tier production studio and an expert team ready to take your content ideas to the next level. Contact the AV department to schedule a consultation and start bringing your podcast vision to life.